QST, QST, QST. On this episode, we have Chris Fielding KG7IVS back on the show to give an introduction to Q codes and Prosigns used in the amateur radio hobby, QRX. This is the Field Radio Podcast. I am your host, John Jacobs, W7DBO, Whiskey 7 Delta Bravo Oscar. Thank you for clicking and tuning in and joining us on this podcast. If this is your first time listening, thank you for giving it a try. I am a third-generation general class operator from Utah. I have a loving and patient wife and 3 amazing children. Amateur radio is one of my hobbies, and I love the outdoors. So putting both together, we get the Field Radio Podcast. My goal is to help you get your gear and get outdoors. If there is a topic that will help you, please let me know by sending an email to John, John, at fieldradiopodcast.org. This show releases every other Thursday, and our friends over at the Ham Radio Workbench with George and Jeremy releases the opposing Tuesdays. Also on our YouTube channel, there is not only this show in audio form, but also weekly video uploads. This last 2 weeks, I've released our video on our winter field day adventure to the local park, operating 1 indoor station, a video showing a tip and trick from our friend Stuart KB1HQS, and a wood plaque that I got from my friend Curtis Moore K5CLM. So head over to YouTube to check out those videos, and make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss anything. You can find all of this and more, including our show notes and links, on the web at our website, fieldradiopodcast.org. While you're there, make sure you sign up for the newsletter so you can be notified of upcoming events. If you have not heard, our friends George and Jeremy have a new feed for their show. They have a new website and a new name. So if you tune into their show, please make sure you update your feed settings with the new feed that is live as of a couple months ago. For more information on their podcast and their adventures, go to hamradioworkbench.com. I mentioned earlier at the top of the show, I got a wood plaque from Curtis Moore, K5CLM, of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. Curtis and his wife have a mom and pop company making various items, including these amazing wood plaques. He can make it with your call sign and various artwork like an antenna or in the shape of your state. He can also do custom work with the designs that you would like. After getting this plaque, I told Curtis to go ahead and use the Field Radio logo with anybody that wants to put their name and or call sign in the plaque. I have to tell you, this looks really cool, and it is a nice piece of art and bling for your shack. His company is 2xcproducts.com. Thank you once again, Curtis. You might have noticed I started off the show with a QST, QST, QST. You hear this possibly on net announcements or the preamble of calling a net. I asked Chris Fielding KG7IVS to come back on the show and give us some history and resources to learn about these terms that are ingrained in our hobby. We'd like to welcome back to the show Chris Fielding KG7IVS. This is Chris's 3rd time on the show. First time he was here for the introductions, talking about his field experience with his Manpack system. Then he was on for HF in the Field, and Chris has been a regular in my videos. He was with us for Winter Field Day this last couple weeks, and Field Day last year. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you, John. It's been an honor to be part times 3 on your show.
So what I wanted to do with this is, and this actually, well, we thought about this idea earlier, but then it came up with Winter Field Day, is there is a lexicon dictionary associated around the amateur radio hobby with terms that are from a long time ago that have carried through in our hobby, that have made it all the way to we're talking about things like QST that made it onto our magazine, or QRZ, the website that we go to look up people's information. So we found that the new ham probably doesn't have the opportunity to learn about these things or understand why everybody says 73 instead of when they say goodbye. And so I thought it'd be a good idea, that we've been wanting to do this show for a while, is this is a foundational episode for the new ham. To make them feel welcome into this hobby when they hear all these terms. And like I said, we'll kind of get into history, but it's really perpetuated all the way through websites and digital modes and even into our club language and our club newsletters. So first of all, we're talking Q codes, Morse Code, Prosigns, stuff like that. So let's start off with let's open up the history books, and we'll start there, and then we'll kind of get into a little trivia and see how many of these codes or prosigns you know.
They're most often used. Yeah. So when we started researching this, it's amazing what the radio telegraphy, how that comes into play. I mean, our whole Morse code comes from back in the early 1800s. So specifically for the Q code, as you previously mentioned, really it's a standardized collection of 3-letter codes that actually, of course, start with the letter Q. And it was used, they call it a brevity code for the commercial radio telegraph communications, and then adopted by other radio services, especially amateur radio. They were created mainly in 1909 by a British government as a list of abbreviations. So they're kind of like shorthand explanations on certain words. So back to distinguish the use of the Q codes transmitted as questions. So all these Q codes can be sent as a question or a statement. Those are in Morse code ending with a question mark. So I had to look this up, what the question mark is. It's dit dit da da dit dit. Just so you know that in the Morse code. So you can ask the question as a Q code and then also send it as a question, get it back that way. A kind of interesting thing, to avoid confusion, transmitter call signs are restricted, and no country has ever issued an ITU prefix starting with a Q. So they're specifically only used. As I said before, they're composed of 3 letters starting with a Q, and they've been modified. Some of the Q codes are broken down for radio procedure, meteorology, radio direction finding, and search and rescue. I can break down kind of what the service is. There's 4 of them. A lot of them are used for aviation, QAA to QNZ. QOA to QQZ is used for maritime mobile service, and QRA to QUZ is assigned by the International Telecommunications Union. So also the ARRL has their own, it's called QN. They've developed their own codes for message handling in emergencies. So we'll actually have these show notes available where you can just blow your mind on memorizing all the Q code.
So let's go down some popular Q codes that I always hear, and I'll quiz Chris and see what he can come up with. So the most one you've always heard, and it's interesting, these were all developed for Morse code, but like I said, they've carried through our hobby. So QST, the magazine that ARL puts out monthly. That's
actually has its origin specifically as it's a general call preceding a message addressed to amateur and ARRL members. So this is essentially saying CQ ARRL. So it's just essentially calling all stations. So that's why it's a magazine. ARRL uses it.
QRZ, our website.
That one is Who's Calling Me. There's no standard. You try to memorize. I mean, I was trying to figure out, does the R mean something? The Z. I have not found anything that specifically correlates to the letters. It's just I would say a code that's made up. So specifically when you send QRZ, it's that you are being called by somebody, and then by a question mark, who is calling me.
Okay. Makes sense, because that's when you're talking to someone on the radio, you go to QRZ to see where they're at. Mm-hmm. One thing we hear in contesting all the time is when they wrap up a conversation, they say QSL question mark.
Yep. That's a confirmation. So did you receive this, or request a card for a contact?
Another big one we hear in the SOTA operations is I'm running QRP.
Yep, so QRP is low power specifically, or they use it as a decrease in power. So if your signal is overpowering, you send the signal as QRP.
You request to go QRP.
It. And then, but there's QRO, which is high power. So it's the opposite of that. You can ask somebody to increase power. We use it more of, you're running a QRP station.
Yeah.
And that's a lower power station.
You always hear, especially on the 2 meters, I'm arriving at my QTH.
Yep, that's used as location. So what is my location, or what is your location? So, you can get specific when it was used earlier as your longitude and latitude, but it's generally, where are you right now?
So what's some vague ones? I've kind of thought through my head the most obvious ones. What's some ones you were surprised?
We've used QSO.
QSO.
That's more of a common one.
Yeah, a conversation. I'm having a QSO.
We've used QSX. I'm listening to somebody on this frequency. QSY.
Oh, QSY to another station.
Yeah, change it. And you
hear that a lot on the 2 meters. Well, yep. QSY to 7.6 repeater.
And we've used, you and I have used that. QRU, as I have said nothing to you. Have you said something to me? QRV, I am ready. Are you ready? The question mark. So there's several, probably a couple dozen that are used most commonly, but there's probably double that are, if you're really into Q codes that are more obsolete than those 25.
So let's move on to our numbers. So the most famous one that everybody knows is 73. So what's the origin of using numbers instead of Qs?
Did a little more research on that, and we'll have this in the show notes also. But the traditional expression 73 goes back to the beginning of the landline telegraph days. They said it's found in some of the earliest editions of the numerical codes. So the first authentic use of 73 was used in the National Telegraphic Review, and essentially it meant back then, my love to you. So kind of a little more
personal than I thought
there.
It would be.
And over the years, it changed to being a friendly word between two operators. So it's become a little less formal, and then for us, it's more used as best regards. Like we use it as a informal goodbye or best wishes to
an
you.
Informal aloha.
Yeah.
But one thing we always pointed out that everybody will catch you on is if you say 73s.
Which it's just incorrect. It's incorrect because you wouldn't say best regards
or goodbyes. Goodbyes to you.
So there is no plural to 73. It's 73. Make no plural of that. So.
And the funny one you brought up, the 72.
Yeah, I found that on QRPers sometimes sign off with 72, indicating that they may be a little short on power for a full 73. So it's kind of fun.
So what other numbers? There's going to be some vague numbers that aren't in the real lexicon of ham radio hobby.
There's a 33, which means it's actually not used anymore, but it was, they have, and we can talk about these other terms when we talk about the Prosigns with the YLs and XYL. Yeah. 73 or 33 was used for love sealed with friendship between two young women talking. So sealed with a kiss, essentially. So it's not used anymore.
So I will not be signing off this podcast with 33.
33, no, hopefully not. And there's 88, which we don't hear that often either. That one is, again, loves and kisses. 99 is get lost. I haven't heard that one. So 44 is used as a handshake as half of 88, often used in flora and fauna connections. So you'd say HH in CW. The other one I found was 77, which is long live CW, wishing you many friends, CW contacts. Yeah, quite interesting. 73, again, goes back to those old telegraphers.
Saying goodbye to each other.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go on to, there's now some other common terms we hear, and this really is more prevalent in our language and especially in digital modes, is the concept of prosigns. Once again, short terms that were created for the ease of use of Morse Code and adapted into our language. You hear them on the phone, you hear them on 2 meter, and you hear them in club meetings and digital mode. So let's kind of go through kind of background to where those came from.
Well, the prosigns, again, early days of radio telegraphy, again, they were used to simplify and standardize communications related to radio operating between two or more radio operators. So it's very similar to Q codes, just another brevity code to make things easier to understand where you don't have to, type the whole word out or the whole meaning.
So we saw this on Winterfield Day and Field Day. We saw and I did this in the macro videos just because I kind of found the common usage of people doing K, just sending just K, kilo.
We had to actually look that up, what that actually meant, because we'd see that in the receipt of the signal and come to find out that means it's an actual invitation for any station to transmit. So something you could remember is K, okay, go ahead. So it's actually an invitation to go ahead and transmit.
And that means any station. Then we were seeing KN, so Kilo November.
And then that was an invitation for that name station to transmit. So it's specifically for that person they've made contact with, no one else.
Yeah, so it's asking for a specific station to please reply. So the most famous one out there is SK, Sierra Kilo, which carries a term to all of us, which is silent key for an amateur radio operator who has passed on, but SK is used in Morse code also.
It is. It's used as an designate end of contact or end of the work. It's actually also written as a VA. What to do that. So, but SKS just means end of contact. You're done.
Okay. Now let's get into the ones that when I explained this to my wife, who hasn't grown up in the hobby, didn't know how she felt about being called an XYL.
And that does not mean anyone's size. Or that's XXL.
It doesn't mean XXL.
So XYL specifically is your wife. So there's a designation of YL, which is young lady.
Which would be the daughters.
And it was originally meaning an unmarried female operator, now used generally as just any female. Yeah. So your XYL is your wife, known as an extra young lady. So hopefully you don't have too many XYLs.
Yes.
There's also YF, also called your wife.
She wasn't as much as upset when I said but I'm referred to as an OM.
Well, this is old man.
Old man. Yes.
And so it's used as any male operator, amateur radio operator, regardless of age. There's old T, old timer.
Yeah. So what are some obscure ones that aren't really? I don't hear that much.
Old chap, OC. We've used. We mentioned weather with WX. I mean that was used when sending a weather report.
Which you see quite a bit on Twitter as hashtag.
Speaking of that, I mean the youth, social media using their own syntax now. I mean with TTYL, talk to you later, KK, or acknowledging yes.
BRB.
Yeah, be right back.
I always thought that meant burp. And I'm like, why are you telling me you're burping?
There's many for that. So GL, good luck. DX, we use that for distance.
DX contacting, DX contesting. Yeah, so that's one of the most commonly used ones.
So yeah, they go on, and again, we'll include this in the show notes. There are about probably more than 60. They're just used as a brevity code to get the word out without, again, RX, receive the radio. These make sense over Q codes for me.
Yes.
With the Q codes, I think unless you're a good just memorizer, constantly hearing the common ones, it just makes sense now. QST, QRP.
Yeah, QRM, QRO.
Just if you use them more often you get on the air, they'll make more sense. But these Prosigns, you look at them, you can probably decipher them. You would think that if you didn't use Morse code, you wouldn't have to learn it. But we learned during Winter Field Day, during digital modes, it's being still used. Yeah,
it's in digital modes. It's in, like I said, it's in our language. You can't go to a club meeting without somebody using a Q code or a pro sign or a number. So these are things that hopefully having you on here and kind of talking about this will help the new amateur or the amateur that's been around for a while and just never really engaged in asking why we use these things. Like I said, it's become part of the fabric of our hobby. And so you have quite an extensive reference list we're going to put up in the show notes. And if you are listening to this on your favorite podcast player or something like that, I encourage you to go to our Facebook page and leave a comment where after we post this audio and tell us your favorite Q codes. Let us know if there's ones out there that we've skipped. Likewise, if you are listening to this on the YouTube channel, go to the comments there and throw down your favorite Q codes or your pro signs that you have found that are usually helpful, especially with digital modes. All right, thank you, Chris, for coming on the show and educating us. We will have you back again when I give you your next assignment. On researching some things that I think will be helpful for up-and-coming operators.
Thank you for this opportunity. I learned more myself studying for this. I do have ideas for a future podcast. Maybe we could talk about phonetics and how it's used, its history, and how we can use it for field day and on specifically just on the air.
Yeah, that'd be a great topic to have. And not only we'll talk about the accepted standardized versions, but also versions of letters out there that people will commonly use when the original phonetics fail. So thank you, Chris, for coming on the show.
My pleasure. 73, John.
73, Chris. Thank you once again, Chris, for coming on the show, and look forward to having you back on for some more segments. For the training item, I thought I would cover your EDC bag or everyday carry bag. These are the things we should have on us in the event of a minor or major emergency, or when our cell phone runs low on power. Hello, this is John W7DBO with the training item. In terms of personal emergency preparedness, we should always be carrying an EDC bag or everyday carry bag. The term EDC bag is not unique to amateur radio. Preppers use this term for items carried on the person every day, such as survival items or self-defense items. You do not realize it, but everyone has an EDC item. It's the watch you put on, your car keys, your wallet, your phone, or your work bag. Moms of little children have quite the elaborate EDC bag, more commonly known as the diaper bag. I have created an EDC list combining the standard EDC survival items, adding in some amateur radio items, and modernize it for our urban cell phone toting life. I keep this EDC bag in my work bag, then grab it when I go someplace where my work bag does not follow. Once you have your own bag, you will be surprised on how often you use it for everyday little emergencies. The bag that I put everything into is referred to as a tactical medic bag that can be attached to other packs as needed. For amateur radio, I have a compact handheld radio, signal stuff antenna, extra battery, and a counterpoise line. To support my cell phone, I have a very small battery backup and charge cord. For tools, I have a pocket knife, compact multi-tool, flashlight, and a Bic lighter. For documents, I have a reference card on our family emergency communications plan and local frequency plan. Miscellaneous items include cash, a micro first aid kit, notepad, pen and pencil, chapstick, and candy. Lastly, I have an Altoids tin that has a basic survival kit in it. For detailed information, please visit my website at w7dbo.net, whiskey 7 Delta Bravo Oscar.net for photos and a breakdown of packed items. I hope you've enjoyed this training item. This is John W7DBO with the training item. This will do it for this episode. Thank you once again, Chris Fielding KG7IVS, for coming on the show. 73.